And welcome everyone to Adobe Live from the sofa. I've completely lost count what episode this is. Maybe Tim can remind me which episode this is, but we've been here.
500.
500. Okay, thank you.
500.
Thank you, Tim. Well, thank you all for joining us here in the chat on behance.net/Adobe Live. And if you're watching this on YouTube, no worries, you can do that. But we are looking at the chat over at behance.net/Adobe Live. So hop on over and join the conversation, because this is what makes Adobe Live such a great place to be, is that you can ask questions to our wonderful guests. And today, co-hosting with me is Maddy. Hi, Maddy.
Hey, Rufus. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. And our wonderful guest today is Raissa Pardini. And she is a graphic designer, type designer, and this is a conversation that continues from last week about fun type. And well, Raissa, welcome to the stream. But before we start, I'm just going to say hi to some of the people in the chat, and let me just scroll all the way up. And of course, Kirsty Hepworth was the first one in the chat. So thank you for being so how can I say so devoted to Adobe Live from the sofa, to always be here first. Kirsty is here. Caroline. Who else? Robert, Alun. Jennifer, Steve, Festus Kasaboom from New Zealand. Yeah, I still have to understand how you do that. Yeah, it must be so damn late. Anyway, Stuart is here, David, James, and well, the chat is full. So welcome. And today is going to be all about graphic design and typography. Raissa, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you, and what do you do?
So I'm Raissa Pardini, as you said. You pronounced my name very well, and I appreciate that. I'm a graphic designer from Italy. I relocated to UK since 8 years. First stop was London for 6 years, and now I've been in Glasgow since 2 years.
And the accent already stuck.
Oh, some people say. I'm actually confused because everyone's speaking Glaswegian, but then I was in London. It's obviously, as a foreign person, I pick things from every one of my friends. So I'm in a confusion, always in a confusion state. But but Glasgow has been really good to me, and I finally gone freelancer since I moved. And I work mostly with music, art, culture, and community project. I'm about to hear my own studio in the heart of Glasgow. So if you come to Glasgow, come and visit me, and I'll brew you a coffee. Hopefully, it will be an Italian one. So
nice.
So I prepared a couple of things to look at so people can understand what I do best. So I work mostly with, this is me, basically. And then I work mostly with typography, lettering, anything geometrical, optical. I love bright colors, bold colors. I love a little touch of retro, as I love our visual history of typography and all. But I like to mix it with contemporary digital elements and graphics. These three are three of my posters that I've done for music. So I work mostly with posters and branding for bands, but also doing a lot of logo branding and any other things. This at the bottom corner on the left is actually a font that we made between 36 artists. It's called Group Font, and we raised money for different charities and foundations all across the globe in this couple of months. So it's a really eclectic project, because each artist got given a letter to design. So it's very difficult to read, but it's just fun. It was for the purpose of raising money. So.
And which was your letter?
So my letter would be, so there are two sets of caps just to avoid double letters in a row. So the first H and the second set of B. So they are quite similar. They got these wobbly things going. So yeah, and
how did that go with the charity? Did that work?
Yeah, really well. So we raised more than just over 4K for the research of COVID-19, and we donated just less than £1,000 over 3 different charities that look after Black Lives Matter. We thought that changing between different charities was important, just to cover as many people as we could. We're still raising because we're still selling the font, so maybe we're gonna just move into another charity soon. But yeah, it's been a great project to put together the creative community in such a hard times. So just by Instagram, we've been talking to each other, we've been reaching out, we made friends with some. Is as you say, and when you started the conversation about Adobe, it's really about community, and it's really about helping from each other and open the conversation, I think. So yeah, it's been really good during really wild times, giving us some hopes. So. But I can start talking through the project that we have with FemType, if you like. So basically,
can you just maybe just do a quick introduction about what FemType is and what it represents?
Yeah, so the collaboration between Adobe and FemType is, we got asked, FemType asked 4 different artists that identify themselves as women to take part of the Wednesday live on Adobe between 12 and 1 UK time. It's a really great project, and I can't stop telling everyone, because women's are in the industry and we are bold and loud, and it's great that both Adobe and FemType do a really great work on these platforms, because giving visibility and giving the chance to women to speak up whenever sometimes we don't, it's a really, really great step that definitely go forward. So I'm honored. What FemType came as an idea was to have a response with a very positive message to the UK festivals cancellation this summer. So they asked us to pick one festival that we like, of our choice, and build a message together within one of the Adobe program, so we can go through it and we can do something together live. So what I've done is pick All Point East, which was one of my favorite festivals last year, and also the branding was done by Studio Morris, which is one of my favorite studio, not only for design but again for equalities and the balance in the industry, and bring up all those values. So I've been trying to think, how can Studio Morris how can they do the new branding if the festival was happening this year. So these are just as you can see, there's a lot of very nice and bold colors, like we said, from what I would like to work with. And I picked a message which is Together as One, which is coming from a Primal Scream song from the 90s. And I thought it could have been that concept of oneness that we can experience from festivals. So we are all there and we all come in one, and we have a great time. So yeah, this is my message. I got a couple of inspirations from the colors of Studio Morris, this is something that I usually do as first approach whenever I start working. So looking at past edition, if I have to do a branding for a festival, mostly I look at past edition, I look at colors that they use, what sort of typography, what sort of audience we would approach. And yeah, a little bit of research is always needed before any project, just to see what's going on around us and be inspired as well. We are designers, so we all take things from other places and corners and we just make them ourselves again. So yeah, if we are good to go, I can start this poster together and see how I'll work on InDesign. If there's any question throughout the chat, of course you will be able to help.
No, maybe before we go to InDesign, one thing that would interest me is to know a little bit about your career path. Like,
Yeah.
what did you study? Maybe did you study maybe economics, and then you became a type designer, and tell us a little bit more about you.
So I study in Italy. You can study graphic design in high school as well. You can pick a more specific route to go to, the latest 3 years out of 5. So I picked, it was called graphic advertisement and visual. So I did that, and it was something that really passionated me. So I decided to then move to Milan for my university and study at the European Institute of Design.
I taught there as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah, right.
Amazing. Yeah, it has this approach that is very progressive, I think. It isn't a public university as such, and it has all of these professionists and professional that come and teach you. So I thought that mostly for graphic design, it was important to actually share experience with the people that are designers. Of course, teachers are very important because of the knowledge and experience, but I thought that mostly for this kind of work that I wanted to do, it was more challenging for me to know these kind of people. So yeah, it was great. It was a good experience. I stayed there for 3 years, got graduated, did my first intern in a publisher in Italy. So that's where my love for InDesign came. So at first I didn't really know how to use university, but I think once you hit the job, the work day to day, then you're gonna learn everything step by step. So yeah, and then I moved to Berlin. I had my first studio experience there. It was just it was a creative studio that they were doing mainly branding and anything like that. They had a front shop that they use for exhibitions. So again, that connection with artists, that connection with the all creative community rather than just designers. I feel that connection with a lot of different arts really helped my job not to be just one type of designer, but taking inspiration from different parts of the arts, because they're all very, I think that now a designer role is more than just knowing how to use Adobe, but it's more like research and experiences, listening to each other, as we can learn so much from any details, so but yeah, I mean, I couldn't speak German, so I couldn't do much. So I moved to England because I studied English when I was 15 in London. So I was like, okay, maybe people will understand me there. And so I never left UK since. I've worked in different places in London, different publications again. And then I decided, I think I arrived to a turning point of my life, being like, I really want to do things that matter to me. I don't want to work for anyone, not in a pretentious way, but I was willing to challenge myself. And I think that it was either not being a designer anymore or try that route. And Glasgow, that's why I say Glasgow has been very kind to me, because Glasgow is a very, very cheap place to live. I've got my space. I've got time to invest on my creativity. London was a little bit more hectic on that sense. I could never stop for a second just to think. It was producing. But that's my personal experience, of course. But so yeah, it was either going back to uni and do politics, or try to be freelancers. And yeah, I've been very happy since I discovered parts of my creativity that I didn't know about. I challenge myself through new skills and new platforms. So yeah, I feel that I finally can say I'm very happy being a designer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you know, you got lots of appreciation from Berlin, I think, in the chat when you were mentioning, your experiences there. There's a few people. Let's see. Steve shared that Berlin takes his breath away. Alun says Berlin rocks as well.
Yes.
And I didn't hear the Glasgow accent until you said the word Glasgow, and then
Glasgow.
I was like, you could hear it.
Well, so, I mean, a Glaswegian accent is actually very popular between British people. They all like it, apparently. I remember coming up and see the people I know in Glasgow when I was living in London, and every time I was like, can you just talk? I just like listening to you. But yeah, I mean, Berlin was definitely a great city for me that gave me so much. Again, it's very similar to Glasgow. It's a city filled with artists, and the government and the council are actually looking after artists in a way that a lot of other parts of the world don't. So it feels that your creativity can really come across, and you have the chance to bet on yourself. And I think it's when, of course, creativity can come from struggle. We know that power, but it's not always like that. Mostly living in a society with social media and a lot of anxiety. Sometimes I feel a lot of anxiety and pressure. So having that stability and safeness, safety of knowing you're in a good city for you, then I think it really takes off a lot of problems from your mind, So yeah, but I couldn't speak German, so I had to take a decision. I remember once I've ordered something like 1 million of books to print, just because I was trying to speak German with the printer, and they called me and they were like, I know you're doing so well, but really 1 million of copies? I was like, oh my God. I was like, they're gonna fire me if this actually went through. They will fire me immediately. So I was like, okay, let's decide to do something about this. But yeah, so Berlin is always popular, a popular one. But yeah, I mean, I can go through the poster if we like, or if there's any other questions, I'm happy to.
Well, questions will come as we go along. So yeah, let's move forward. And
okay, so we got the message, we got the inspiration. So we're gonna go and open InDesign. Got a new document here. Let me just see if it's an A3. So obviously, usually a poster is A3, but we know that since social media are becoming really important, there are lots of different formats to do and to apply our designs to. So let me see if this is full screen. That's it. So I was thinking today to use a font. The first thing that I do usually by working with a lot of fonts, I need to find the right font for the project. So I think that's the first thing that I need to do after a little bit of research. So today, because I'm a woman and we got FemType, I thought I would pick a font made by a woman, which is Nicole Safranova. Her font is free to download from her Instagram, which is always a great thing. And it's called NAB, N-A-B. So if we put our message in, so together as one, I usually go through my library. So what I do, looking for fonts, is an sort of an everyday thing. I always look on social medias, on account. I follow accounts of type foundries or type designers, try to find new things. Platforms like Fonts in Use or other platforms that are similar are very good to understand what kind of font and detect the name of the font before buying it. So I actually try to buy everything that I see that is my style. So whenever I come to design something on my computer, I already have a library that is quite wide, but of course everything can be done more bespoke and more unique. So anyway, I've got this font and it's called Nub, which I thought it was bold and quite digital looking. So let's blow up the font. A second thing that I do when I test the font is see if all my letters and my message is actually clear, because mostly when we have to design a message, if the message is not easy to read, then of course we do half of the job. Still, we are designers, still we have to deliver the message properly. So yeah, I tested this font before and it's actually quite nice. We got the G and the S, they are a little bit more unique and less easy to read, but in the whole thing I'm quite happy with it. So what I would do is if we go back to my PDF, I want to show the way that I work a lot is using this sort of repetition in order to make optical and geometrical shapes. Using repetition is actually a smart move as well when we have to adapt our format to other different formats. For example, if any of this poster needs to be done in square, either you take off some of the layers or you adapt. So it's shrinking quite easily whenever you use repetition by adding more layers of text or take some off. So what I want to do is using some repetition because it's really what comes across from my style. So I was thinking, firstly, let's give a margin to the file.
Just add, may I say just something? Like, just there's an E missing at the one.
Together as, oh my God, sorry.
No, before you do the repetition, that's
amazing. You know that. Great, thank you. This is the importance of copywriters in an agency. So in the meantime, I put some margins. So I want my together going up here and S1 going down there. So I want the words to stretch from side to side. And of course, I'm trying to put some guidelines just to do it properly from the program. So one of the first thing I do as well when I use a type font is actually looking of the space in between the letters. So sometimes we have a little bit more space in between two letters than other two letters. That's not a mistake from the type foundry or the type designer. Sometimes it just comes out that way. And of course, there are things that like oval shapes and horizontal lines that of course needs to be longer and needs to be wider. So these are just rules that we can definitely break just by putting a little bit less space between the letters. that's allowed. So now it looks a little bit better. I would say that this space between G and E is a little bit too much in compared to the rest. So I'm going to put just a 5 and see how it works. Yeah. And then I'll look at here, see like A and S have looks like less space than ON and NE. Sometimes that's what I need to, so I just put like another 5 and maybe a little bit less here as well. I can go with a shortcut by doing Control Options and then the arrow right or left, which is a great tool that I always use. So after I'm quite happy with it, we can always modify and change things eventually, but that's the first step, just to make everything look a little bit tighter. What I would do now is actually give an outline to everything, because what I want to do is using every single letter as an object. So I'm going to use the shortcut for, I can do from there, for the outline, which you can find here. So now we separated the letters, but if I try to move it, they just move as one thing. What I want to do eventually is actually to be able to take one letter off and work letter by letter. So what I'm going to do is ungroup everything and then shortcut, but I'm going to show you what it is. Object, path, release, compound, path. So now what I can do is take a letter out of the composition and work as an object. So I noticed that the G is made by 2 shapes. So what we want to do before we go, I'm just going to move the video before we go forward, is actually make this tight. So through Pathfinder, which is a great tool for object, I can select both shapes and go to this first one, combine selected object into one shape, and it will become one shape. So now that everything is ready to be working on, I'm gonna start blowing my text. So I want this to go down there and I want this to go up here. I'm going to try to stretch together as much as I can to the margin, and I'm going to try to do the same with this, though it might be too big. I mean, it doesn't really matter because there are 2 different lines, but I will go smaller anyway. So what I can do is maybe go down a little bit and then put this on the other corner so everything looks a little bit more nice. What I detect again is that this all doesn't look as, I'm just gonna look after the spacing again between letters as we go. Okay, so we can try to make some repetition now. So I'm going to group this, and I'm going to group this in 1, and I am going to give everything an outline because I want the repetition to have a different color inside. So let's say I'm going to go, let's have a look at the PDF for some inspirations from All Point East. So I want something that is maybe pink, and then we can do maybe we can do a background in purple. We can try a couple of things. I've tried it before and I actually found this color that I really liked, which was DC 648 and D. We can take the advantages of the RGB because we are doing a digital, so the colors can be bright. The reason why I put an outline here is because it helps me with the repetition. If I didn't put an outline onto the black text as well, when I do that, it wouldn't be smooth. The line wouldn't go one after the other. So I'm gonna try and test if it looks good and bring it down. So obviously you can do it from here as well, arrange, bring forward or backwards, but you can use a couple of shortcuts. So there are some details that I always look out for. So for example, if I repeat the E, it would be nice if the repetition actually goes up until the middle of the E. So the next repetition will look like it would just place here. So it's quite nice. If all these details are tight and organized since the start, then the job will look much better. So there are different tools on InDesign to repeat some sort of artwork, and some of them can be found here. Step and repeat. Basically, they give you you can enter how many repetition you want, if you want to create a grid, and if you want to offset and stuff. But I'm going to do it manually because sometimes I like to look after the process a little bit more into details. So let's try to see. We don't need to be extremely precise because we can always use tools like if we select everything, these tools up here are always very helpful. So if I do that, it will do the job for me so I don't go crazy. And I can try to do the same for S1 going upwards and see if it works. Sometimes I use the Control I, which is the eyedropper tool, just to detect everything from another artwork. So it will be the same. Bring this down, bring this backwards, and then try to have the same sort of. See again, we have another E. So if I try to be as in the middle as possible, it's a nice little precision. I'm a precision freak, but I think it's important because there's not many things you can do with a font that is already been designed. So, it's if we pay attention to all of these little things, then.
And Raisa, what tips would you give to people to space out the letters? Because you've done that a couple of times, I've seen, and I think somebody actually asked in the chat actually the process there.
So whenever, let's just do another example. So if I do together as one again here, and I'm using the nav font. So let me just go to 100 maybe. Yes. So there are some shortcuts. So it's all visual. You can create your own guide structure behind it if you want to be more technical. But I think that after a while that you look after these kind of things, everyone develop a little eye balance detector. So it's almost just like looking between the space and notice that obviously this space looks way bigger than this. So it's just going through each letters. Instead they just give some spacing that is general to it, which I can do. It's actually going between letters and individually move something as little as 5 instead of 10 or 20 or 30. There are some shortcuts for this, and the shortcut is Option, arrow, right arrow, left. So you just have to click as many arrows as you like to go back and forth. This is a great shortcut as well if we want to do the kerning between lines. So let's split this into 2. So I'm gonna go, the kerning is quite wild. Let's do 80 maybe. So if I select this and I go up, it goes up as well. So option, and the arrow. So either the arrow goes up or down, or you put it in between two letters and you go right or left. I think that this action is actually all across the Adobe programs. I've been using it in After Effects before, and it was really helpful. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has anything more specific, you know, we can talk about the fact that some of the letter, for example, I don't think is the case of this font, but if I duplicate this, I think that this font has the same height, yes. So usually, so this is not the case, but usually, if we put a guideline on our height, bottom and top, usually letters like O or S are stretching themselves a little bit higher and a little bit lower than normal letters. And that's an optical thing that type designer have to keep in mind, because oval and circular letters are always going to look smaller than letters like E, for example. So we need that little stretch just to bring a sort of visual balance to the font. So it isn't a mistake. It's actually something that we're always going to find. It's something that we can adapt, but yeah, that's how it goes. Our eyes are incredible. So I just gonna put a little bit more of this just here to play around with, and see how we're getting on. So view, I think I want together and S1 to sort of meet at the middle of the composition. So I'm going to put some more. And I mean, this is only an exercise, so we're just going to try to be as precise as possible. So I like this. What I don't like is that I think that this space that we have in between letters should reflect also the space in between the lines, mostly here. So again, we don't have enough time to properly look at how much space we're taking and make something that is geometrically perfect. But I'm going to move this as well. But maybe we can make this a little bit bigger to here. And then this one again as well to there. So at least this wasn't the same height. Let me see. Yeah. So at least there's like a first balance sort of composition. What I don't like again is that another detail here. It's really nice when the start of a letter line goes with the start of another line. So you see here we got actually the end of H. No, there is this little corner from the H that is just offset from the corner of the N. These are very little things that we can adapt as we go, and they're really nice, I think. So if we group this, it's okay to cheat a little bit and stretch it, I think. So at least our eye will be pleased to see that. Okay, so one thing that I do often is save, obviously, the document, then type, and Adobe Live, in caps. And one thing that I have been mistaken so many times in the past is that it's so important to create your own folder before you do anything. So not in this case, because all you have is a font, and because the font is part of your library, it will always be linked to your artwork. But if you have photos or you start introducing element to it, if you have a folder from the start, then every time that you close and save again, everything is in one place. I can't describe how many times I haven't done it and I couldn't find something and I had to relink it and it was a nightmare. So I learned from my mistakes.
And Brian says that he loves the negative space between the letter shapes. Yeah.
Pardon?
Brian loves the negative space between the letter shapes. So I think that it also makes a very nice, very nice shape.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the font is lovely as well, and it's already very geometrical. So when a font is like that, it really does the job. It's really nice. That's why when I say that our typography history is so important, is because fonts never gets, a font never gets old, because you can always give a font a new face and a new shape. And another thing I don't like. So here, you see, I know that this space between T and O is actually right, but what about moving the composition a little bit more, just to give some space as well?
That's better.
Yeah, so I'm gonna bring the margin back and reduce it. So again, these are all little things that we can do to make our composition quite nice. But yeah, definitely the importance in the detail is something that I'm always trying to look for. Now we don't have the same space between these letters. So you see, it can be something that it can be very playful and it can take you a little bit of time, but then whenever you got the structure you're very happy with, then everything will be very pleasing. So what I'm going to try to do is maybe stretch this a little bit more again.
And Sandrine's happy that you're closing the gaps between the lines. Sandrine says that it's made her complete watching this. So yeah, we do have a question from Steve. He says, can InDesign files like this be brought straight into After Effects to animate?
Yes, they can. And, you can save things as PNG with a transparent background, or if you wish to have a background in color, of course, you can just keep it. But what I do usually when I work with typography is try not to have any background in the back, and only have the typography with a clear backdrop. So when you put them onto After Effects, you have a little bit more freedom to work around the typography. I remember when I started doing animations, I actually was working a lot on Photoshops as well, doing GIFs, because sometimes I like that sort of old-fashioned animation look. So for example, if I duplicate this into I have nothing. Oh, wait. So you can do so many things with different programs. So if I delete all of this and I've got each layer one by one, so let's say I get all the first one here, I group it, and then I'm going to try something quick, but I'm explaining myself in a second. Oh, no. Copy, paste. Okay, so for example, I can start from this screen and I can go to this screen and I can create, the next screen going, that you have another repetition. So if we look at the preview, it's already an animation. So first, second, third. And if you save all of these as a separate file and you import them on Photoshop or you import them in After Effects, sometimes it's very, very easy to do animation. So InDesign is definitely a program that helped me at the beginning of everything, just because I've got the freedom to work around typography like no other program for me. But yeah, so maybe we can put the background, we say maybe in purple, as we wanted to get inspired by this sort of digital content. I've taken a note of a purple color before. Again, we go on RGB 7C00F8. So let's see how it looks. I'll put it behind. So as you see, it's already looking like a poster. I had an idea of how we can, sometimes the message is only represented typographically, but it isn't giving out. So I'm wondering if there's a way to bring together and one in a little graphical element that we can maybe place here. So I was thinking of doing something like that to help just the concept to come out a little bit more. So as we do something that is inspired by festivals, I was thinking maybe if we put a lot of different dots. I don't like it when they go on top of each other. If we put a lot of dots.
And you got to put 1.5 meters between each dot.
Oh, you know me already. You know, I've never been like that. At uni, I was almost like, oh, whatever, I'll do it. And if it doesn't come out the way that I want at first, it wasn't worth it. Sort of like, but then, of course, with a little bit of work, I was like, nah, that was very wrong. So this is an example, right? So we get there, and then there's one there. So I'm wondering if this kind of message will give a little bit more away the togetherness of being at a festival all together in front of a stage where one person plays. And so you see a little detail that is more graphical in the poster already. It's giving away the message in a stronger, definitely in a stronger way. So that's it. I think that's our exercise. But as I was saying, the fact that we use repetition is actually on our favor if we go and make a new document that, for example, is a square one. So let's just do square one. I don't need to name it. So let's just do, I don't know, 1,000 pixels. So if our client or our branding or anyone asks to do the same format in square, how quick is to do my square here if I use the repetition. So one thing, I'm going to stretch my background. Another tool that I always use is Ctrl-L to lock everything I've got, because I can just work on other elements. It's almost like having another layer. We can use layers as well, of course, from here. Having a layer, there is a background, and another layer that maybe is just the black font, and then another layer just for the repetition. When it gets too complicated and we got a lot of elements, layers are really, really good. And it's something that a lot of people use on Photoshop, but it took me quite a while for me to understand that actually the layers were on InDesign as well, and they were very helpful. So I'm going to put this together and lock it as well.
And Raisa, you mentioned at the start of your career, InDesign was like the first app that you used.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chat in the there's a lot of chat today talking about the differences of using Illustrator versus InDesign for this type of project. Do you think it's a preference thing? that you've chosen?
It can be, yeah. I think that right now the difference between Illustrator and InDesign is actually very minimal. It probably doesn't exist. Illustrators is better whenever you treat images as well, because it's got a relationship with Photoshop that InDesign doesn't have sometimes. And I think that my preference comes from InDesign because I've learned InDesign at a time that InDesign was better for the type. So I am better on InDesign because I know the shortcuts, I know what to do, and I know how to do them. So I think it is definitely preferences. So as I go, I've got more experience on one program, and that's why I stick with that. But there's a lot of conversation about how actually Illustrator became something very, very, actually not even very similar, actually the same as InDesign in some tools. And some of the tools and shortcuts are similar as well. So even if I adventure myself on Illustrator and don't remember something, we can always test if the shortcut works, and sometimes it does. So it's a little so yeah, I think it's definitely preferences. So you know, a lot of people like working on Illustrator because you can create a lot of different boards, so you can see they're all branding together. So I think it depends on the job that I'm doing. If I look after a lot of different things, then I use Illustrator. If it's a poster, then I love using InDesign because I know much more, and for me it's more fun. When you know something so well, you're just like quick and easy. Yeah. But definitely a choice between one or the other is very individual and personal. But yeah, a lot of studios I saw that they all starting to use Illustrator more just because of the connection that Illustrator has with Photoshop and for other
and also After Effects.
And After Effects, of course, yeah. So it's much more easy when it comes to that because you can trace everything and you can launch it. So yeah, it was a good question because I actually had a conversation with one of my studio pals recently about Illustrator because I was like, no, I love InDesign. And it's like, no, but Illustrator. So it actually made me think at the time what the difference are. And I actually had a look online from tutorials and just longer reading from different designers, and no one said, you know, everyone was just admitting to the fact that they're actually the same at the moment. So yeah.
Cool.
So I was just trying to put this into a square. So by deleting some of the layers, then we can just stretch it to any format. And as we know, like mostly festivals and digital contents, they can stretch to an event page, they can stretch to a web header or anything, or you know. So it's important to keep that in mind. I think whenever we design that. There will be requests, and the request will be to adapt it. So I find putting a lot of different elements easier than to work on different formats, because you pick and choose different element and you know you remake a format and it's easier. So having a lot of graphics is always something very smart, I think. But yeah, I mean, I'm still here doing this.
And how long would a project take you? That's what I'm keen to know. The creative process, how long do you think you spend?
It depends, because of course, as I said, that's why I love working on InDesign sometimes when I've got posters to do, because I wouldn't want to stay on a poster more than a day, a full day, because I think that if it all comes out in one day, you got so much inside you, from research, inspiration. You are totally into the briefing, you are totally immersed in everything. So I think that's the peak of our creativity on a project. Because if we go back and forth a million of times, sometimes it doesn't work for me. So that's why I like working on InDesign, because it's quite quick for me to do something like that. And but obviously, if we go into branding and if we go into logos, there's an understanding that has to be done from my side and the client side, and we probably spend more time on a brief just to try to nail it and try to understand. But usually the first thing I do, just because I work more with typography, is I work step by step with the client. I don't like to give them a final work. I like them to be involved in what I do. So, a first thing to do could be, hey, I've tested a lot of fonts. Do you feel yourself represented in any of this? So they come back to me and they pick 2-3 fonts, and I already understand what kind of things they're looking for. So either I can do more research or I can just work with those 2 or 3 fonts. And then as we go, we pick the font, and then we want to introduce something, and with no time, we just already done the logo, and then we move on into the rest. But I think clients appreciate the fact that they are involved into something that they can do because they ask us to do them, because we got the skills. I can certainly do many things in life, so I'll let other people do it for me as well. But it's good for them to see also, because being a designer doesn't make you be the person that has to decide on a branding. The branding needs to reflect the client, and is our responsibility to understand that and to make them always aware of what you do. And I think it's very productive if we work step by step, because we usually don't go back on our step, we just go forward. And of course edits and stuff can be done, but I think it works really well for me. And it doesn't waste anyone's time, if it makes sense. So yeah, branding, and of course After Effects stuff, it just takes the time that it takes. I starting a little bit of Cinema 4D that is linked to After Effects, and is a completely different word. So you have to put yourself into a different platform and think in a different way. So it's not only 2D anymore, and so it takes the time that it takes, just because it takes a little bit more time to process what you're gonna do and test the things. Sometimes you have to do tests to fail to know that they don't work, but you wouldn't know up until the end, and you're like, okay, I just spent 2 days on something that I actually don't like. But you have to go through that with video stuff. It's not just the Adobe things, but anything video, unfortunately, you have to see the whole product before, the whole file before sometimes knowing that it isn't right. So I think, probably poses and stuff are the funnier part, the most playful and quick thing that I would do. Because again, as long as I got a font that is really striking, as long as I've got a couple of colors that really represent the band or the client, we're already halfway. And then it's just trying to find ways to represent font in a different way, and translate the artworks in multiple tasks. I don't know. But
Raisa, we're at the top of the hour. That went so fast.
I know.
What would you then add to this? Like, just talk us through it. Like, what would the process be then?
For the poster,
yes,
in general. Well, so I think what I was trying to do is, again, pick a font that I think that it will go with the festival. Pick a couple of colors that maybe remind us of the latest branding. But again, we can't do anything that's too similar. It's tricky because you want to do a similar enough to create a familiarity and a consistency throughout the years, mostly with festival branding. But then you can't do too much because it's a new thing, it's a new edition. So that's why I took the color mostly, and you know, this font is quite bold. I took it a little bit bolder this time, and I've looked at what Moros Studio does. So they'll be playful. They'll be doing something maybe similar to this, or maybe not, but it could be something and an approach that they could take by looking at their work. So I was like, okay, you know, if I got given something new and there's a past in history, I have to make my research, and I have to understand what people before me did. Because it's nice to be consistent, and it's important visually, because people will refer to you and will know it's you, and you became that visual identity. So yeah, we did that. So we work with typography and repetition, which is something that I use often. I put this little message here just to emphasize and mark and highlight the fact that the together comes in one, then which was the message that I wanted to give away as a festival. And it reminds me a lot of little people watching someone on stage.
I like it.
So yeah, it's never a silly idea. You know, we can test anything, and then sometimes something could look silly, but maybe it doesn't look that silly as much as we think. So test, yeah, it's like test everything. You can only test stuff before knowing that is the right one. So you know, sometimes you are lucky at the first design, everything just looks incredible, but just keep working, and that's my
everybody in the chat is very, very thankful for the session and you sharing your process. So thank you so much. And I'll just remind everybody in the chat that the conversation goes on Discord. Either Tim or Tony will put the link here in the chat. We have a Discord for Adobe Live UK. So join us there if you want to continue the conversation. Maybe Raisa will join us there too. Who knows?
Yeah.
If you have any questions, more questions for her. And Raisa, maybe one last thing, one shout out to the community, one piece of advice, or
the piece of advice is I've been a better creative when I started to listen to everybody and be helpful as well at the same time. So as you said, I'm here. If anyone wants to reach via email, via Instagram, or I'm always trying to be very to care a lot about anyone's requests or questions or anything. And also I'm willing to open a dialogue if there's something that I can do better. So please reach out if you have something to say, and let's get connected.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Maddy, for joining us today. You will be on stream again tomorrow, right?
Oh, wow.
I am not sure. I might be. I'll double check, but I'd love to. So we'll find out.
All right. So thank you, everybody in the chat. Thank you for joining us today on this special session of Adobe Live from the sofa with Famtip and Raissa Pardini. And I will be seeing everybody very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.